All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's October 17th, 2024. Welcome to Scouching Live. Today, I'm joined by Steven Ellis of Daily Faceoff. Steven, how are you doing today? How are things?
I can't complain other than my body's a little sore from getting pummeled by shots in ball hockey yesterday. But other than that, it's going good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. It's funny. We were just talking about your ball hockey experience. I personally am a bit of a ball hockey player. I've been on many teams where I've been outshot many times over. It's not a good feeling, but you just mentioned what the shot totals were last night, and you are the goaltender of the team. So what was the workload last night?
68 to 15. So our ball hockey team is dead last. I joined it late as well as a couple other people. Our issue is we can't score and we can't defend, and we clearly also can't stop balls. It was close. It was like 3-3, like halfway in, and at that point, I don't think we got a shot in the final 15 minutes, and we died. So
Well,
I'm
that's
not going to
really
NHL.
too bad. Yeah, no, not quite. Or the whatever it's called, the highest levels of ball hockey. I think they're international these days, but that's neither here nor there. What we're going to do today is just do a little bit of an overview of the 2025 draft class, get Steven's opinion on what we're looking at, go through some names that he's got pretty high that I don't, some names I have pretty high that he doesn't, and some guys that we both seem to really like. And we're going to, just kind of get a general overview of what things are looking like in terms of our mutual perspectives. And so, Steven, I'll let you start things off. In general, with your experience looking at the 2025 class this year, what have you seen? What's the overall story or trend that you think is out there about the group as you've seen them to this point?
This is a very well-rounded draft. I think when you look at we might have at least one goalie taken in the first round, maybe two. We're going to probably have a couple players from the Quebec League go in the first round. That seems to become rare each week or each year. It looks like we could get as much in the top, 20. We could get as many as 6, 7, 8 defensemen. It's going to be well balanced. That's the thing about this draft where you look at 2023 was all the high end talent players, the Bedards, the Mitchkoffs, the Fantillis, the Will Smith. Last year, so much talk about all the defensemen that were going to go high, and then in reality, not many went in the top 10. This year, I think we're just going to see a nice mix, and that's good. We don't have a Connor Bedard, we don't have a Macklin Celebrini, but I think the competition at the very top is going to be really good between James Haggins, and I think Porter Martone deserves a lot of love there. But those are kind of the guys that I like.
So would you say that it's then for you a 2-horse race at the top? And because for me, it's like there's maybe Haggins at the top, but then there's a pretty big group of guys that aren't that far behind him for me that all kind of mesh into the same group in some way. But for you, is it more of a 2-horse kind of thing right now, at least at this point?
I need to be really convinced it's not James Haggins at this point. I think just the stuff that we saw in the last couple of years, he's the guy. But talking to some scouts who think that it's actually pretty close between him and Martone. And the one way it was described is if Haggins is your Jack Hughes, then Porter Martone's your Matthew Tkachuk. And I think that from what we've seen of Martone, especially when it comes to international hockey, that's a guy who likes to get under people's skin. And
oh yeah,
watching, I was at the same game you were at, the Pink in the Rink game that Brampton held recently, and I was talking to a scout, and they're like, I could see him go number one, and he immediately scores. Now they didn't give him the goal originally. I think this is one where they had to they changed the score. It was Carson Rakoff, and they moved it to him. But he then played the third period with a leg injury. Still goes out and finishes a 3-point game. This is a guy who's able to go out there and dominate, and is going to get over 50 goals this year. But he's not as much of a dominant all-around player that James Haggins is, where Haggins can play with just about anybody and make it work out. And I think that right now I'm giving Haggins the edge, but I wouldn't be surprised if Martone's name comes up a bit more as the season goes on.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about this type of discussion, especially with these two players, is a really good example, because I have them 1-2 as well right now. But for me, the big thing I think that also puts Haggins a little ahead of him is it depends on what you put value into. And for me, I see Martone as an excellent future NHLer. Like you said, that Matthew Tkachuk, very well-rounded, skilled, powerful guy. But with Haggins, it's more like he plays a style of game that every NHL team kind of needs more of, right? You could use more Matthew Tkachuks on your team, sure. But James Haggins is one of these guys who He's a good catch and release passer. He sees the ice super well. He elevates everyone else's game, right? Like Hagens and Martone on the same line together would be dynamite, but Martone without Hagens, I feel like would be less effective than Hagens without Martone. And I think Hagens without Martone would be better than Martone without Hagens, I think is what I meant to say if I did not say that. So it's kind of that argument for me where that kind of is what puts him ahead, but no disrespect to Porter Martone. Like you said, he played the third period with what looked like an injury. I remember that as well. And he just looks like a guy who can play in the NHL, not too far from now. But yeah, I think that there are some guys that could challenge him, especially considering like your number 3, Matthew Schaefer, is a year younger than a Martone is. And I think that who knows where Schaefer is in a year from now. He hasn't even played a game this year, but we'll see what happens. But in general, yeah, I think it is a pretty balanced class. And so we can talk a little bit about some of the differences between the two of us. So obviously, I haven't put out a list publicly just yet. I probably will in November or December. But I mean, mostly I see things pretty similarly to you. The one thing I did want to bring up is that you seem to be a little bit higher on pretty much the entire QMJHL class than I am. I mean, a lot of these guys for me are early seconds into the second round. But you have guys like Guite in the top 20, Carbonneau at the end of the first round. So we'll just start with Guite because he's the one that I thought was most intriguing out of all 4 of those as an NHL player. But give us the rundown on Guite and what you see in a potential top 20/first round player.
That's a guy that just produces when you put him in open space. Like, I remember watching him at the U17 World Challenge, and then again a couple months ago at the Helenka, where it just felt like when he had that puck in open space, whether it be the power play, whether it just be a good shift by that team, he made things happen. And the thing with him, and he is one of those guys I think that he kind of relies on, he's got to score goals to be really good. And, guys like that will obviously fall. And I will say, like, obviously preseason rankings, or when you go out and you're doing your first one in November, like we're going to have a lot bigger of a sample size. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm basically thinking my November one's a full rebuild. Like every time, it's like, who knows what's going to happen at this point.
Sure.
But when it comes to Guite, I like how much he shoots the puck, and he reminds me a bit on the confidence in the way he shoots and where he's willing to shoot of a guy like Cole Eiserman. Not to the same level. Cole Eiserman was kind of in a special class when it comes to putting pucks in the net. Not the all-around game. When it comes to Guite, I think we're kind of seeing that too. I'd like to see a guy who's, go out there and hit some more guys, go out there and play a bit more defense. But right now, you still need guys who can score goals. He's proven he's capable of that. Right now, he's off to a bit of a slow start. So we'll see. But I think I still like him a lot because every time I've watched him in a showcase event, he's always been one of the best players out there. And while those are still just small sample size, these week and a half long tournaments, I do think he's shown enough times that he can go out there and control the puck and do with it what he wants.
Right. I mean, I do see definitely a talented shooter and a guy who I definitely see can score goals. I did also see maybe a bit of a physical edge to him as well that I think is there once in a while. But I'm also curious about Alex Wong. I mean, he's a guy who definitely is a point producer. When you watch him at the Q level, I see a really sort of creative, like a guy who leads with sort of creativity and sort of a dynamic style of play, especially with the puck on his stick. What's your read on Alex Wong? And I know he's a guy that people have asked me about over the last few weeks, especially because his point production has maybe taken a bit of a slip relative to last year. But I mean, long term, I'm not super concerned about that because of the offensive game that he brings. But what's your thoughts on Wong to this point?
I think we're seeing a guy who's a bit more defensively responsible than when he first came in the queue. And I think the first real example of that was watching him play. He wasn't playing every shift with him, but playing with Matthew Schaefer at the Linka. We saw a guy who was maybe hanging a bit back compared to what we thought he could do. Like when you look at 36 points as a rookie defenseman, you're thinking, okay, next year, like sure thing, probably going to get at least 50. And this year he's on pace for something like 30. Like he's on pace to decline a little bit. I just said there. When he was playing AAA, I remember watching clips of just a guy who can just, like, he controlled the pace of play. Okay, so he goes to the queue. That's not going to happen every single night, especially as a 16, 17-year-old. You got to be able to go out there and be a bit more defensively responsible. And I think that he has improved that. I also think, he's not a big guy. He's 6 foot, 170 pounds, and I feel like it's almost a little too big for what he looks like out there. But what I like about him there is that he's willing to block shots, he's willing to get in the way, and he's a smart thinker. And I remember talking to a bunch of the guys who were at the link who were kind of saying it's like he's kind of a boom bust guy where you're banking on him being that all around threat, but is he going to be strong enough at that next level? Is he going to be able to? Are his numbers going to be able to translate? Now, right now, obviously, those numbers aren't super high, but I do think that he's smart and adaptable, and I think that will be able to take him somewhere.
Yeah, I'm curious because the other guy on this list too is Justin Carbonneau, and Carbonneau's a guy who I've seen a few times this year, and he's such a skilled player. Like that's a player that leads with so much skill, almost to a fault. And I think it speaks to a bigger point that I'm curious about your thoughts on. And I know there's no right answer to this, but we're talking about a lot of guys where they have a thing, they have something that is special about their game in the context of where they're at, and around it is a little bit more rough around the edges. With Carbonneau, the skill is there, but for me, there's a lot of sort of processing and hockey sense stuff that, he tries to do a lot on his own. Alex Wong is, like you said, still figuring out sort of the defensive side, and that's sort of affected his offensive game. Guite, it's more of he's a great goal scorer, but where does the rest of the picture come in? Caleb Desnoyers, who we haven't discussed, I think is a guy who leads with his hockey sense and just the vision that he has on the ice. But a lot of these guys have a little bit of a gap in their game. So how do you evaluate these guys as they all sort of mix together, and where you might put them, and who takes precedence over what? Like what's your thought process with these types of players?
It's funny, you kind of mentioned like he's almost too skilled for himself. And I've seen a guy who can go out there and just make some great moves, beats everybody, and then just forgets what to do with it, or just dekes himself out to a spot where he's not in a scoring position anymore. And that is something that, we do see from time to time. With players, especially out of the Quebec League, like that's the thing. We not to pick on the QMJHL, but that's a league that doesn't get a ton of well-rounded players. And I think when it comes to him, it's a very good skater, uses that speed to his advantage, I think, and he's also not afraid to knock guys down. But then he'll go out there and he knows he could be the most talented player on the ice. He knows he could be the best player on any given shift and really make things happen. But then he doesn't use his teammates enough, or tries to do too much himself. And that's kind of my knock on him there. I think, you see him right now looking pretty good. I think there's a lot of talent there. We should see him in that showcase tournament against the U.S. National Team Development Program, which I believe we are getting the rosters for next week. Cool. Shocking. I think we know who's going to be on the NTDP team.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Hey, bring back James Haggins. But I think with him, it's just kind of like, don't outthink yourself here. You're a smart player. You're a skilled player. Don't go out there and try and do everything yourself. Use your teammates a bit more.
Sure. A guy I'm curious as well, before we move on to some guys that maybe I'm a little bit higher on. Have you, with Artyom Vilchinsky, where I've seen him a bunch of times this season, because I still am really trying to see a player that is a first-round caliber defenseman. And I personally am really struggling with that based on what I've seen of him this season. What are your thoughts on Vilchinsky and how you've seen him this year? Because he started in your first round, and I'm curious of where things have gone since.
Yeah, I think I got him 33rd in my most recent rankings, and I'm probably going to fall. He's going to fall down a bit there too. He's one of the oldest guys in this draft. Like I think he was born like a day after the cutoff. And the thing with him, he's a big guy. He's like 6'4", and he's over 240 pounds. I feel like he's too big. Like he's almost he's a good skater, but he's not a fast skater. Like he's going to be able to handle himself. He could do the turns well, and he's not going to in short little bursts. He's good, but it feels like he's carrying a little bit too much weight for himself. Kind of like Juraj Slafkovsky in his draft year, where it's like, dude, you could probably lose 15 pounds and still be effective and still not have an issue there. I really, really just wish, man, that guy would shoot the puck a bit more. Like the start of the season here in the MHL compared to last year with who was that Russian guy, Silayev, where he was just he kind of had a bit of a good offensive start to the year, and then things fizzled out, but no one really thought that was going to last. I kind of look at the way they both move the puck very similarly. Nowhere is dynamic. I'm starting to kind of trend into the situation here where I do think Vilchinsky is just going to be a guy. He's going to be a guy that he might make in the NHL and might be a third pairing defenseman. I just don't think he's got that, he doesn't have much offense going for him. He needs to be a bit quicker to go out there and be more effective most nights. Yeah, he can play defense, which is actually quite important because a lot of defense don't play defense these days. But I feel like he's got to go out there and just be a bit more explosive, a bit more active, and a bit more, in some cases, reactive, actually. So, yeah, I don't know. He is falling for me. I'm just, the last couple times I've watched him, it's been hard to notice him.
Yeah. That's kind of where I fall on him as well. So you put out a piece today about Adam Banak. You had some interesting things directly from him, as far as I know, about his playing, his style of play, playing in Youngstown. It's out on dailyfaceoff.com. The link is in the description. So why don't the guys that I'm a little higher on than you are all the smaller end guys? And I know some people might not be surprised by that, but the differences aren't that big. For me, Banak, LJ Mooney, and Cameron Schmidt are the guys where I'm a little bit higher than you. But since you just spoke and put together a piece on Adam Banak, why don't you give us a little bit of a lowdown on your impression of him, your thoughts, because he played so well at the Holinka. He played at the pro level last year, and granted, it's only been 6 games, but he's just under a point a game in the USHL, where I think expectations might be a little bit higher. So where have you come down? What was your experience with him like? And just maybe if you can expand on the work you just did on him.
It's a player that really understands his deficits. And, at this age, 17-year-olds, that's not always the case. You'll run to a lot of players who I don't know if you ask them how to, like what you need to improve on, won't give you an answer that seems to be what everyone else believes they need to. But when it comes to Banak, it's like, he's a guy he knows he needs to be stronger. He knows he's got to go out there and be more skilled, and be quicker, to go out there and make it work out. He is working a lot in the weight room to try to become stronger. I think part of that, when you could have a ton of skill, but when you're going up and playing against men as a 16, 17-year-old, and you aren't strong and you're not big, you are going to have a big issue there. I think going to the USHL, you're still going to get a lot of time in the weight room there. And if he goes college route, I think will be very beneficial for him, because he'll go out there and he'll be able to focus on becoming just stronger. I remember seeing this skill level. Like, this guy has been hot and cold at points. If you remember him at the U17 World Challenge last year, which, by the way, I'm going to that for the first time this year. Very excited. On. Sorry, I just booked that all today. But when you watch him with at the U17s last year, that looked like a guy that was lost a lot. And it seemed like what we saw from him at the Holinka a few months prior was, a completely different player. But then we saw him again this year at the Holinka, and he had some dominant games. And I remember watching with some guys like Corey Prom, Cam Robinson. I think we kind of just came to conclusions like, this is a guy that's going to have to beat players with skill if he's going to be effective at the next level. And every level, he has proven he can do that. I think, obviously not a ton of points in the Czech League last year. That is a tough transition. There's a reason you don't see many Czech forwards come out there. But in terms of pure skill, he's the most skilled player to come out of Czechia, I want to say, since David Pastrnak. Edward Shala, I think, just for me, I never was super high on him, and he fell from where he did. But Banak, it's like not a sure thing to go first round, that's for sure, and maybe not even the first real small guy to get taken off the board. But when it comes to all that skill he's got off the puck, what he could do in open space, power play, everything, I think this is a guy that will be able to make it to the NHL and be a decent player.
Yeah, and I think also, just to speak to the point of people who might look at his production and be a little bit concerned. I mean, I've seen a couple of games of him with Youngstown. I've tracked data from one of the games that he's done or performed, and I really think that a lot of it isn't really his problem. Like, I feel like he's a player who can skill his way into issues. Like, I think he tries to challenge guys one-on-one a little bit too often, and when it doesn't work, it isn't ideal. But his play in the offensive zone, once the puck is there, is outstanding at this level. And so you see what he's doing well, but I feel like the defensemen have trouble getting him the puck. He has trouble, establishing space in the neutral zone, which, might come with time. But he's a player who I think over time, I would not be surprised to see him just get steadily more and more comfortable and get better. Because, I think that, like you said, he leads with his skill level. He's extremely skilled, and that should take him a long ways.
That team doesn't have a ton of game-changing goal scorers either. I believe there's only 6 games in, there's one guy with 3 goals, and nobody else has more than that.
Yeah, and he is a guy who, in the games I've seen, there's been a lot more evidence of him being a shooter, but that wasn't really my impression coming into this. Like, he has a great shot and everything, but he always seemed like more of a balanced player than what I've seen so far. So we'll see how things go with him. But yeah, I mean, I kind of did want to touch. You did mention that he might not even be the first real small guy off the board. So for you, like, who might that name be, and why? Because I know some of the people in the audience are very curious about the small guys in every NHL draft.
See, I like Cameron Schmidt a lot. I do, and I think that's a guy that likes to be in front of the net. Watch him at the Helenka. It was funny. I was sitting with Corey Pronman the whole tournament, and we made a bet. It was like, all right, like, he doesn't think Schmidt's going to go in the first round. I think if he does, we're talking the end of the first round. But I still think there was a guy there that can go out there and make it work. You know, he's 5'8", very quick. I know, like, elite prospects had him a lot, really high guys like that. For me, it's just, can he go out there and handle, like, as much as he loves being in front of the net, is he going to be able to handle that at the next level? And the reason I say, well, being in front of the net is this guy's got 11 goals already this year. Like, he scores a lot. He has the puck on the stick a lot. We saw at the Helenka where he was, again, spending a lot of time in front of the net. Really good at that U17 tournament last year. I think all his points were goals. I want to see a guy that can go out there and be like, you can't expect every single player in the lineup to be a perfect 200-foot player. Or I guess, like, I think that's something that a lot of players will get knocked for. It's like, I think you look back at Cole Eiserman, it's like, if there's one thing you're going to be good at, it might as well be the most important thing you do on the ice, which is scoring goals, right? But then he also has that ability to go in there and hit people. Maybe he's not going to be a penalty kill guy in the NHL. Maybe he's not going to do this, but that's fine because he does what he does and he's good at it. I think with Schmidt, it's like he uses his speed to burn guys. Really good puck handler, and I think he sees the game really well. Another one of those guys, though, that I think can outskill themselves at points and make some really smart plays and then just put themselves in a spot where they can't go out there and finish, and can be a bit predictable at times. But you look at this year, and again, 11 goals in 9 games, and that's a guy who's on a really good start, and I think it's going to continue.
Yeah, I mean, I largely very much agree, and I know for a fact that this is a very divisive player. There's a lot of guys who really believe in him, and there's a lot of people who really don't, for a number of reasons. I think when you want to talk about a guy, you mentioned a lot of people maybe conflating, I forget who it was, maybe Emil Guite with Cole Eiserman. I mean, if you want to talk about a sort of analog to Cole Eiserman, I see a little bit of that in Cameron Schmidt, where I think Schmidt's a little bit quicker, but in terms of the shooting tendencies and the, in my opinion, kind of underrated ability to get pucks to the middle of the ice from the perimeter, that more so than I at least thought he would. And the same thing was true with Eiserman. But just hard to project as he is and if it's going to work. So I'm curious of your thoughts, because that kind of just popped in my head watching him the other day, sort of seeing him in a similar vein of like strengths and areas of improvement as Eiserman. And that's a guy who went 20th and fell in the draft. So is that kind of up the same alley in your mind, or do you think there might be a more apt, maybe contextual comparison?
I think that's pretty accurate, honestly. Like, a guy that you look throughout his numbers and, like, has he ever played in a tournament where he had more assists than goals? I don't think so. And obviously that's not the number one thing there, but you just watch him. He's always seems to be in the right, like, he might not even be a play driver, but he's in the right spot when you need him to be, whether it be on the power play like we saw at the Helenka, especially early in that tournament, or whether it be this year where it just, you know, you pass him the puck, something's going to happen. So yeah, like, I'd say that's probably a good pick there.
Yeah. So in terms of guys where both of us have them somewhat high, especially relative to others, but in some cases not, I'm very curious about Conrad Fonderk. He's a guy who you had pretty high, as well as myself. Because he's been definitely, in my opinion, of the NTDP guys, probably the most impressive all-around player. I really like LJ Mooney, but I think there are real shortcomings in his game, but Fonderk just seems to really get it. So what's your read on Fonderk, and maybe touch on the NTDP as a whole? I know you also have Charlie Trethewey pretty high. He's a guy I've had a tough time getting a read on. So, you know, where have you gone with the NTDP this year? And I think it leads maybe with Fonderk and Trethewey, but feel free to go wherever you want.
Well, first off, do you know what LJ stands for?
Oh my God. I do, but I can't recall off the top of my head. It's awesome though.
When I asked the PR guy for the NTDP, they're like, yeah, it stands for Little John. It's like, you gotta be kidding me, right? Because his dad's name is John. I'm like, he also goes by LJ, Large John.
That's just
Hey,
amazing.
when I asked about that, he thought that was pretty funny. When it comes to Frundrich, a guy he's really skilled. I think you watch him last year at the NTDP. He was one of their highest point leader guys all year long. Creative, smart. I do like the fact that last year there were points where I thought I wanted Mooney or Moore to go out there and shoot a bit more. And Fondrick was the one who was going out there and getting that done. He was doing that. I think if he can add a bit more muscle, he'll be even better. But I think that's a guy that's kind of going a little under the radar. Because you look at William Moore, I think a lot of his name value comes from the fact that he also tried to get exceptional status the same time that Michael Nisa did. So he's been in the consciousness for a while. And then LJ Mooney, this fun small guy that makes things happen, but also happens to have a pretty famous cousin. I think when it comes to Frundrich's just kind of lost in the shadows there. But I think that he's just talking to guys from that U17 team last year, and they said, like, yeah, he's one of the more, smart players. He's one of the more creative. He's one of the more underrated guys. When it comes to Trethaway, I think, with him, really good with the puck, but can be caught forgetting to play defense, a la Cole Hudson, Lane Hudson, kind of at the same age, not the same size or anything like there. Obviously, with Trethaway, he's a bit more physical, brings a ton of power to his game. I want him to clean things up because he is prone to making mistakes, trying to do a bit too much. But if he cleans it up, I'm not too concerned about him because I think he's really smart enough with the puck. He's a good two-way defender. And I remember heading into the U17s last year, that World Championship, and he was like, by and large, like the best player heading into that tournament. Then he had a really good showing for USA. They didn't end up winning gold, which was kind of surprising, but also kind of shows you it's not the strongest NTDP team, right? Like that's kind of the thing about this year's group. It's not going to be one that's drawing all the eyeballs that last year's did, or the year before, really, I guess.
Yeah, and I know the other one you have ranked that I honestly don't have a great read on, so you can say whatever the heck you want. But Cole McKinney is a guy who, like you said, like I think this team, the NTDP this year, has a lot of these just really solid hockey players that can slot in maybe down your lineup a little bit, but nobody that I think has the projectable sort of superstar or even a star, quote unquote, potential. But Cole McKinney's one I've had a tough time getting a read on. So what are your thoughts on McKinney before we move on to the last few players that we wanted to go over?
Yeah, with McKinney, I think the thing that they really did with him last year and even at points this year is they put him out there late in games when they need to shut things down and win the game. I think he's a good two-way player, really good on the penalty kill, blocks a ton of shots. He's just driven every shift out there to make something happen. I don't think he's a guy that's going to go out there and be an NHL point producer, but he's a guy you could probably slot into your third line and be a good third line player because he puts that effort out there and he is so committed at both ends. Like he's a guy that a coach will say, go do this, and he'll go do that. I'd like to see him take another step in his game and be a dominant offensive player. I don't think that's him, but I do like the fact that he's out there, going out there, and is willing to kind of just get everything done at any point to make your team win.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have seen something along those lines. I just find it's hard to project those guys beyond this level. So I'll keep a close eye, but we'll check that out. Before we move on to some guys who we just really, really have enjoyed that aren't getting much attention, Blake Fiddler and Radim Murtka are sort of the bigger, rangier defensemen that I think have stuck out this season for one reason or another. I actually just finished watching another game of Radim Murtka. So I don't know if you've seen much of him this season playing Pro League in Czech or in the Champions League, but what's your thoughts on Murtka? Because he's one that I feel like if you ask 10 different people, you might get 6 different opinions on him, and I'm curious of yours.
There were some scouts that had him top 5 around the Holinka time. And now, for some context, I was told he was never healthy in that tournament. He entered the tournament with an injury and never played healthy. And I thought he was still very good there. But that's just one kind of little showcase event here. I think with him, you've got that 6'6" size. I do think, he's not going to be a guy who puts up a lot of points in the NHL, but I think he's actually quite capable of holding his own with the puck. And I think that's pretty impressive. I think, Obviously, you look at this year, he hasn't really done a whole lot on the board. He's been a lot of those games in the Czech League, he's playing under 10 minutes a night, which is why I don't love really good European guys playing in the Czech League. They just really don't care about their player development in that league. But when it comes to, his style of game, he can shut guys down there. He can go out there and, again, not flashy, but we saw him playing against guys like Gavin McKenna and players like that and going out there and just shutting them down with ease in some cases. So I think, with him, you're never going to get that flash. You're never going to get a guy who's probably going to excite you enough to even really notice him. Sometimes the best games he plays are the games you don't notice him because he just plays pure defense. And you still need guys like that. So I got him a 14. I think that feels like a pretty good spot to keep him around there, but we'll kind of see how the year goes on there.
Yeah, he's in a similar range for me, and I think I might be a little bit more optimistic about the sort of flash in his game because he seems to just have these brief moments. Like in the game I did today, he was playing at the pro level, and he's not the most amazing puck carrier, but he carried the puck into the offensive zone from his own end in a relatively under control. But he just kind of dropped a shoulder, went deep in the offensive zone, circled around the back of the net, and just shows really good patience, I think is what I'm getting at. Like he seems to have on breakouts and in the offensive zone, like he doesn't rush things. He doesn't just chip the puck because he doesn't see an option. A lot of his plays are really, really clean. And so, I think there's a guy there that like lacks a little bit of refinement, but he is a 6'6", or whatever it is, 17-year-old and is pretty young for the draft. And I feel like there's something very interesting there. And every time I've seen him, he's just been very up and down. It's very strange, but I can definitely see why some teams would see him as like a top 10 or top 5 guy and they sink their teeth into him and see where he is in 3 years. I think Blake Fiddler, though, is a little bit different in the sense of like, I feel like he's a little more refined, a little bit safer in a sense. But what's your read on Blake Fiddler? There's been a lot of talk about him since the Hlinka. But I'm always curious about your thoughts on a guy like him.
He's another big body defenseman. And, I think part of it is when you're looking at kind of early season projections, you give an edge to the bigger guys because that's typically how NHL teams do it. But when it comes to him, very aggressive player. He's actually a really good two-way threat. I thought, even though he didn't blow the doors down offensively at that tournament, I thought he made some really good puck carries, really good decisions with the puck. He was just passing to guys who couldn't finish. That was not a very good American team. Mm-hmm. Watching him, though, in the WHL, a guy that I think should be included on that CHL team that plays the United States because from what we understand, they are going to be taking players that are not just Canadians. But he's someone who just goes out there and he understands his assignment. Block shots, awesome. Play the penalty kill, awesome. But he also has some pretty good offensive instincts, and it's good to see that that's kind of starting to show. When you watch him last year with the Oil Kings, didn't put up a ton of points, but I thought showed, hey, like he knows what he's doing with the puck. Right now, we're seeing a guy who's looking with all that confidence. He's playing right now, and he's like, he knows what he's got to do. He knows what he needs to do, and goes out there and produces. And the fact that he's playing at just under a point per game is a good start. But then he's also got that size, he's got that physicality and that shutdown ability that he can rely on when needed. So very well-rounded defenseman at this point.
Yeah, I think there's more and more of that I'm seeing as time goes on. We'll see where things end up. It's obviously still very, very early in the season, but it's been interesting to see all these different, like you said, a very balanced group of players from top to bottom with all kinds of different play styles, which has been interesting. So everybody, it's starting to look as though there's a bit of a picture starting to gather of who people seem to think might be in that first round range, who the groups at the top might be. It's starting to sort of slowly come together, at least in the data that I've got. But in your mind, is there anybody sort of not off the board maybe, but someone who you just want to sell, someone you just want to pitch, someone points at you at the draft table and you go bleh and say a name or two or three that you really, really think people should be paying more attention about?
Yeah, so I originally I thought I had him higher than most other people. I know Elite Prospects now does, but I'm really big on Brady Martin, man. I watched him play for the first time when he was like 14 years old. He was playing up a year with the Waterloo Wolves AAA team and was like not a point per game player, but like a 1.75 point per game player as an underage player. Then he was over a point per game player in his actual draft year. And I remember being with Ryan Kennedy from the Hockey News, and we're watching him, and it was like a random like weekday at the OHL Cup. Not a ton of people watching Waterloo because it wasn't a team most people were paying attention to, and watching him go end to end to win a game with a beautiful goal, and mentioning that to scouts who remember that and saying like that was the play that really put him on the map because he was out there. He was a high pick in the OHL, but he was just so dynamic, so skilled, and just loved, like was able to take that team on his back. The last year got injured, just never seemed to be fully at ease. He kind of had to get forced back in the lineup, and it just didn't really work out for him, especially on a team that did have high hopes. But we saw that pure raw energy, like the dragon energy you want from him, where he's got to go out there and win every shift. He doesn't want to get beaten. We saw him at the Hlinka where he wasn't Canada's top scorer. He had 4 assists, but he was making some unbelievable plays that were getting scouts to talk about him all the time. And now he's already over a point per game player. I'm expecting him to get over 30 goals this year. I'm expecting over 80 points. But then he's got that ability to just be energetic, and he wants to hit everybody out there. He grew up being the player on his team that had to do everything. But he also knows how to use his teammates. He's a smart player. And right now we're seeing a guy that is the best player on his team, the most dynamic player on his own team, and I think is going to go in the top 20 of the NHL draft.
Interesting. Yeah, he's one I honestly haven't gotten a good enough read on to whether I agree or disagree, but he is on the list, at least for me.
You should agree in the end. Let's just say
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Got it. All right. We'll note that in my notes. And yeah, Steven Ellis threatened me. Got it.
Yes.
So we did get one specific question privately directed towards you before we I know you have to go relatively shortly. I am curious about your thoughts. I don't know why this person asked this question, but they made it very clear that they wanted me to ask it. But if your belief that a hot dog is a sandwich or not, and especially because we at the rinks, hot dogs are a common commodity, and so I'm wondering of your opinion on this maybe dated meme.
That's you kind of summed it up. It's a dated meme. Why are we bringing this up?
Okay, we can move on then.
I've given no thought to it ever in my life.
Yeah. Got it. All right. Well, I'll let the person who asked know and make him feel bad. So I want to turn it over to you. If you have any sort of closing thoughts, anything else you would like to ask me, what are your, things you want to get out there before you take off and move on to your other things today?
How many goalies do you think get taken in the first round?
That is an excellent question. I think there will be. I mean, I've been watching goalies this past week. I think there are 2 that I would be comfortable thinking about in the first round. And I think there are 4 really good, legitimate goaltending prospects, at least that I can find. So I would say 2 or fewer in the first, maybe. Top 40, probably 4, I think. I think it'll be something like that. What about you?
I've kind of got 2 in the top 40. I like Ravensbergen and I like Jack Ivankovic. Obviously, we're kind of banking on him becoming as tall as his dad, who he says is 6'5".
Okay.
So we're hoping that works out for him because that would be obviously really good for his development there. But I will say I do remember. Do you remember the name Jet Alexander?
Oh yeah, I do.
Yeah, Toronto Maple Leafs goalie one time.
Legend. Yeah.
He was drafted to the OHL at 5'8". I believe he got up to 6'5" like a year and a half later. Yes. And talking to him, and it was like the big thing for him was just trying to adjust to being that much taller. So if Jack Ivankovic becomes that big, will that hurt him? That's a good question, or a question I'd be curious about. But yeah, I do feel strong about the goaltenders this year. Like in general, like there seems like there's better depth. Again, just going off of the one international term we've seen so far this year at Hlinka, not a lot of bad goalie performances unless you're Switzerland, but everything was bad on Switzerland, so who cares? Right. But they have great chocolate, though. But when it comes to, this year, I feel like, it's kind of a resurgence for goaltending. And you look at the fact that Canada's, their roster for the Five Nations, Samuel Montembeault might now be the hot goalie for that team. I think there could be a point in 8 to 10 years we're looking at and saying, you know what, there's two clear guys who are legitimate star goalies in the NHL trying to fight to be the number one on the Olympic team. That would keep things interesting.
Yeah, I do think it is a strong year relative to other years for goaltending. I thought there were some interesting ones maybe last year, but nobody that I would have really thought of as, super, super high end. And, guys like Jesper Wallstedt don't come along very often. And, goaltending is always so hard to project. I mean, for me, I really like the two European goalies who everyone seems to be looking at, Love Harenstam in Sweden, and there's a Russian guy who I've really liked, Pyotr Radrionov, who is just saving everything he faces this season on a team that just does not seem to play much defense in Moscow. I really like all four of them, though, and that's kind of why I said these guys are probably top 40 dudes. And yeah, I think it is very interesting to see, especially because this season in the draft class, from what I've seen, and you might disagree, it pretty quickly turns into, yeah, we could take this guy, but maybe there's a chance that this goaltender is the number one guy and it's 20th overall. Mm-hmm. So we may as well take a swing. So I'm curious of where you think that cutoff might be, where you might turn and go, you know what, maybe I will take the plunge on an Ivan Kovic or a Ravensburg in this draft, in your opinion.
See, Ravensburg, I feel confident he's going to go in the first round because teams like that size, and you think if he can build off of that great season he had last year, and we're looking at him probably as one of the World Junior goalies this year. We'll see. They seem to really like him despite not having a good camp in the summer. If you're picking Ivan Kovic, you're banking on that pure upside there, right? Like, that's the thing. There's so much upside from him. It's whether or not that outweighs the size concerns, because the reality is, Dustin Wolf's had his issues in the NHL. I like him. I still think he's gonna be a very good goalie. Devin Levi is starting to kind of get it together right now for Buffalo, which is a good sign. When it comes to people pointing out and say, oh, like UC Saros made it work. UC Saros is like the only active goalie under 6 foot.
Yeah,
it's like this is like he's the exception, right? So it's really hard to expect to see guys like that. But I think with Ivan Kovic, like, he's been so good at every event, whether it be, last year, like, Leenders was hurt during the playoffs, but man, I think Ivan Kovic should have been the guy there. And hard to do that when you're de facto starting goalie is a draft prospect that year. But when it comes to him, like, he's out there, like, the Steelheads expect to go out there and win this year.
Yeah.
And they're doing it with a 17-year-old goalie.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot. That's impressive. And he's really good. And we've seen kind of what happens to that team when he's not in the lineup. So I think, I'd bet high on him. It's just, are the NHL teams going to? I don't know.
Well, yeah. And I think in terms of size, and we'll let you go after this, but it seems very interesting to me that there is an argument that if they're going to have a discussion about size and the importance of a player's physical dimensions, a goaltender, it actually does make a difference. If you're talking about the difference between a 6-foot goaltender and a 6'4" goaltender, I can't remember off the top of my head what the diameter of a hockey puck is, but it is notable that inches can matter with goaltending. And the big thing that I've noticed watching smaller goaltenders relative to bigger ones, yes, the bigger ones might not be as athletic in general, just because they have more mass to throw around, but even something so simple as, and you're seeing more and more young players scoring goals doing this, but you're seeing guys take more maybe questionable shots from closer in that's more to the side of the goaltender, but they're just, if you're 6 feet, it's really hard to cover all the way to the top of the post, right? All the way to the crossbar, but if you're 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", those extra inches can make a huge difference. And something so simple as that, we talk a lot about how teams play below the goal line and how they can get goalies to be down and in a butterfly and stay that way. Taking up space in that position and being able to adapt to play as it goes on around you matters. So that's kind of where I look at a guy like Ivan Kovic and I'm like, yeah, there's a great goaltender there right now, but projecting him is going to be a question that I think is a legitimate one for NHL teams. And so I think it'll be fascinating to see where he goes, considering where the cutoff point is going to be, where teams start looking at goaltenders.
I will say this. I think the way to fix goaltending and how we scout them is let them play in the NHL for 10 years before they get drafted. That way we can see what they're like against NHL teams.
Interesting thought. I like it. Or just have a league that's all goaltenders.
Yeah,
10 goaltenders on the ice, and they just go at it and have some fun.
You get
anyway,
David to go out there and do one-on-ones with these guys, and whoever makes the most saves wins. Easy.
An exhibition event for goaltenders with NHL players. There we go. We're getting somewhere now.
Would anyone watch it? Probably not.
Yeah,
I would.
Well, yeah, sure. Anyway, Steven, thank you so much for coming on as always. If you have any closing things you want to plug or anything you want to put out there before you take off, please, this is your time. And if not, thanks again so much. We'll hope to see you soon, and have a good one.
Yeah, so I guess SLS Hockey on Twitter, dailyfaceoff.com for all my NHL and prospect stuff. And thanks again for having me.
Yeah, anytime, man. See you around.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
All righty.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much to Steven for that. That was a lot of fun, as always. A very good resource, a very humorous resource on the game, and a very, very nice individual. So many thanks to him for coming on. If you didn't know, you didn't hear his voice, producer AJ is here. He was working behind the scenes on that
Don't
one.
worry,
So
I put my name on the screen.
oh, okay, got it.
People
okay.
can read, I hope.
Well, yeah. I mean, the literacy rate is pretty good, but I think it is dropping, so we'll see. But yeah, so thank you to Steven. That was a lot of fun. Got some really, really good thoughts on there. They're all wrong, but that's okay. No, I'm kidding.
Also, great topic at the end that he came up with, because we did not have that down there on the list.
No, we did not.
We generally outline what topics we're going to talk about, but Steven came up with something pretty great that I'm going to be hopefully making shorts out of if I get my lazy butt to do it. And that's why I'm putting it out there publicly. Shame me if I don't, please. I need it. I need the public shame.
If we don't see shorts or clipped videos in the next 48 hours, write comments under this and yell at the channel.
Specifically,
I mean, exactly. Tag AJ in it, and then he'll figure it out. But yeah, I mean, it was really, really interesting, and it's always interesting to think about goaltending because it is kind of a discipline all on its own, and it is kind of almost like a completely different game to play. You know, it's very mental, it's very athletic, it's very tiring. You're the only guy that's out there for the whole 60 minutes or more. And judging them when they're 17 is not easy.
No.
I know how I do it generally. I think that the way I do it is not super complicated, but it's about as far as I'm comfortable going. But it's what's their track record? You know, have they switched teams, and how has their track record been there? You know, what level of hockey are they playing at? And how do they play? Are they guys that can track the puck quickly? Are they guys that can track the puck automatically almost? Like a guy I always go back to, and again, I talk about this a lot. I urge people who are interested in this kind of thing to not only watch the NHL and see how NHL players play, but, you know, go back in time if you can and watch some high-end prospects who are now high-end NHL players and see what they were like at 17 or 18. Even the guys that were drafted really late, you know, who came out of nowhere, so to speak, quote unquote.
Yes, like
and,
Logan
and became NHL
came
players.
Out of nowhere.
Right. And and so with a guy like that, it's helpful to go and watch junior hockey tape and go, okay, what are the factors? Because generally speaking, I've said this many, many times, but generally speaking, players don't just magically all of a sudden become amazing, right? It's really, really hard to close that gap. And I find that that's a pretty big trap that people fall into. But at the end of the day, NHL scouts are not bad at what they do. A lot of the time, they get it right. They identify the guys that are really likely to be NHL players. And at the end of the day, they, become NHL players when a coach decides they're ready. And you can always go back and look at that. And so with goaltenders, I tried to do that last season and the year before, especially since the experience of tracking or watching, I should say, Jesper Wallstedt and Yaroslav Askarov, those two guys who were considered elite goaltending prospects. And we're still kind of in that weird stage where they're still almost NHLers, but not quite there yet. But it's goaltending and it takes a while. The thing is, I look at goaltenders and I go, okay, what's the track record? All of that stuff. And then I just watch them. And when I watched, I think Wallstedt is the best example of what it really means to be an excellent goaltending prospect and why he was playing pro hockey at 17, 18 years old. And I think a big reason is because of that. He was almost like Optimus Prime. He was almost like a transformer, just like always locked in, tracking the puck, always square to it, super quick with his movement across the crease, going out of the crease to close angles or collapsing into the post and covering space and just staying calm. And the only real thing that I felt like he really had trouble with was seeing through traffic. There was a few instances in his draft year where guys were patrolling around the perimeter of the ice and he would kind of just be there and involved, but lose track of things or not able to see around a guy and just not keeping that enough there to keep up, and goals would beat him from further out than they probably should. But when it came time to difficult situations scoring wise, whether it's right in front of the net scoring chances or between the faceoff circles and everything or at the faceoff dots, he was pretty darn good, and figured it out. Askarov was a psychopath. I mean, he's still kind of is like, he's more of a, I'm going to make the save no matter what the cost. And I don't care who critiques me. It's going to happen. And he saves a lot of pucks doing it.
And he drops his stick a lot.
And drops his stick a lot. But Dominic Hasek was the greatest goaltender of all time. And he did it by being the most unorthodox goaltender in the history of the sport. So there's that to work on. But again, there's only been one Dominic Hasek. So if Yaroslav Askarov can be the next iteration of that, while maybe being a little bit more traditional, not quite as, Gumby mode as Dominic Hasek was, one of my favorite players of all time, then maybe there's something there. So goaltending is always an interesting topic, especially for people who are trying to figure it out a little bit. It is difficult. So yeah, I mean, AJ, I don't know if you had any more thoughts that you wanted to go over after now that Steven's gone. We can slander him, we can compliment him, or we can just get right into the questions. What do you think?
I think complimenting is the correct approach, just because, I like having people on.
And he's a nice man. He's a nice guy, and he's a goaltender himself. And I think, he doesn't deserve slander after facing 60 shots last night.
No, that's ridiculous. Get Steven Ellis some help, please.
Yeah. Someone needs to get on Instat and scout some help for him.
Some good beer league players for him.
Yeah, some good beer league ball hockey players. Absolutely. I'm not one of them, honestly. Yeah, I'm not one of them. But yeah, it's always great having him on, and thank you again. If he's watching or whatever now, but probably not. No, he's got other things to do.
I think he's doing a certain thing that Daily Faceoff will, I think, probably release at some point, but
yeah,
I don't know if we can get into
it. But yeah, no, we can't. No, we can't. Okay. We cannot. We should not. Okay, so then I guess we could just get into the questions and then get out of here for today.
I do have one thing I want to say before we go into the questions. How about those Leafs? Huh? No, you thought you could escape an episode without me mentioning them? No. I'm bringing you right back into this. I am dragging you to my territory. That was an awesome game last night.
Okay. It was, yeah.
It was a lot of fun. Never in doubt. Just a great performance. Austin Matthews on the board now.
Yep.
It's on the board. Number 1. How many goals does he score this year, Will? Give me an answer.
62.
Oh, come on.
I think he goes on a rip and crosses 60.
Nah, he's getting 70 this year. He's doing it.
Okay. All right.
Look, man, there are tons of times where he doesn't score, and then he just pots like 3.
Yep.
So I think he's gonna really push for it. Maybe not. Okay, realistically, 65. That's where I'm aiming.
All right.
But I'd love to see 70. Love to see it.
The thing I kind of took away too, I did watch that game. I watched a few different games at the same time, so my takes might be terrible, but
they always are. So it doesn't.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, if you're ever sports betting, which I don't personally condone, but it's allowed, don't do what I say. Do the opposite and you'll make money. Because I curse NHL teams, but maybe I'll curse this team in the backwards way, because what I took away from that Toronto game, the LA Kings, man, I was hoping that the Kings would be a team that kind of started turning the corner a little bit and pushing themselves in the right direction. I didn't think that they had a particularly great night. I think their goaltending was a huge problem.
It is really, really, really rough for them there.
Yeah. And I mean, Toronto's goaltending has been great, of course, but the Kings are a team where I'm sort of going, are they going to cross that Rubicon, right? Are they going to, when is that going to happen? Because the young guys are playing, right? Turcotte and Clark and Byfield. I thought Byfield always looks great.
He looks great.
Always. But I mean, and it's not like they're not scoring, right? Like in their division, they have the 4th most goals scored to this point. But they are the
7-goal game that they lost.
But that's the thing. They had one game where they had 7 goals and lost, and they've given up 17 goals in 4 games. So I don't really know what is happening there, but they're a team that I've always hoped kind of is that team that built with young players and kind of moves in the right direction. Alex Turcotte scored a goal last night.
Mm-hmm.
But they seem to lack that, like the Toronto Maple Leafs come with star power, right? Like that's what they have. And it seems like the Kings don't have that still.
They're holding on to Kopitar and Doughty. Like
right.
That's their biggest star power still. And Byfield's kind of elevating into that, but beyond that, they don't have it.
Right.
And they traded away 3 pieces for PLD.
Oh boy. Yep.
And then they traded PLD for Darcy Kemper.
Right.
So what do you expect?
It's a team where it's very interesting to me because they did go through a quote unquote rebuild, but I feel like they also kind of, the Rangers did this, but it worked.
It worked because they had Adam Fox just show up and sign, and Artemi Panarin show up and sign.
Yeah, exactly. And the Kings haven't really had that. And the money they're spending on free agents, it's like Vladislav Gavrikov, who's fine, but I don't like who are the other marquee free agents the Kings have added.
Well, they lost guys too.
Yeah, they lost guys.
They lost what's his name? Matt Roy?
Yep.
And he's good.
Sean Walker, but he had left I think 2 years ago now, or a year prior. They shipped him off to Philly. They sent off Sean Dursey. Yep.
And that was also in the previous season.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like it's a weird thing. Like it's really this is also kind of why I don't. Oh, they added Joel Edmondson.
Yes.
There you go.
Wow.
So
big addition.
He is big.
Just literally big addition, not in the sense of importance.
So it's like this is also kind of why we talk a lot when people are like, "Oh, I can't wait for my team to rebuild because when you tank, you get good draft picks and everything." But
no, you don't.
It's not a guarantee, right? This is also why I always say like tanking. There's almost no point to it because if you look at the NHL draft, and if I may toot my own horn, I believe that there are always really good players that you could just take a swing on, whether you are a team that just missed the playoffs, lost in the first round. Hell, a team that lost in the conference final could have taken a swing on Brad Lambert, right? Like
that's what happened with Logan Stankoven, I think.
Right, Logan Stankoven's a Dallas Star. When did the Stars tank last, right? Like years ago. So the Kings are in that situation, and the Buffalo's another one where it's like it's really, really, really hard to relearn how to win, right? Even the Montreal Canadiens, like they're getting there. But it's been a slog of a time where you're playing a lot of young guys and letting them play and letting them play and letting them play. And eventually, ideally, you get to the right place. Ottawa Senators are another one where it's like they've been rebuilding forever and it just hasn't come together one way or the other. They've tried with guys like DeBrincat to force it to happen and it just hasn't worked. So I'm always a little bit skeptical of these sort of let's tank, and because when you lose, that's the easy part.
Yes.
The hard part is starting to win again. And the Kings, I think, are probably the best example of that because they have been in the playoffs, but it's just they haven't
or the Red Wings
crossed that point, right? Yeah, they haven't crossed that point where it's like they can't. I mean, they push Edmonton around in the playoffs, but they don't win, and it's hard to beat Edmonton. But you need to figure out a way to just keep getting better. And their solutions have been guys like Edmondson and Gavrikov and moving guys or losing guys.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll see what happens. But yeah, that was what I kind of took away from that. I mean, the Leafs do look great. But in that game, I kind of sat back and went, yeah, okay, yeah, we could do that too.
But actually plan the parade. Like actually start thinking about it, because this is a serious this is a serious team. But get back to your point.
Well, maybe I was just gonna say, well, maybe they have a first round with Montreal again and shock the world in the most horrible way again.
I think a lot of their problems came down to their pace. And this year, that is not a problem. So far.
They are going. They go.
And
yeah,
the intensity level that they bring with Craig Berube on the ice, that's the stuff I'm looking for. So
yeah, I mean, the thing I've picked up on, and then we'll get to questions, but the thing I've picked up on is like the depth of the team seems to be just grinding offense. Mm-hmm. Right. The guys, you know, there was a little bit of talk about how guys like Matthews and Nylander and Marner and whatever weren't in the first few games of the year getting their feet going and getting points on the board. But, you know, yeah, I mean, now it's kind of helped. Matthews scored last night and Nylander scored last night. They're there. But they also had guys like Bobby McMahon, who wasn't even in the lineup opening
Bobby
night.
McMatthews, excuse you.
Right. Bobby McMatthews, sorry, on pace for a gajillion goals this year.
He just pops random 2-goal games every once in a while.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to think they're not random anymore.
He's the Leafs Josh Anderson, you know, just goes and shoots. And then next thing you know, he's got goals.
He's
you know,
better than Josh Anderson. Fight me.
Okay. But I mean, Josh Anderson is 50 billion years old at this point, and McMahon is what, 27? Is he 26? Something like that?
I don't know.
I don't remember.
I love him.
Yes. He is 28, it looks like.
Doesn't matter. Still Bobby McMatthews.
He's 28. Undrafted. That's another thing. You don't have to have draft picks to have good players.
Yes, that is the truth.
Yep.
Was Artemi Panarin drafted?
No. The thing is that's interesting too is I've said this multiple times, but I've got data and information that really good defensive players in the league are just as often undrafted as they are second and third round picks. So just because you don't get drafted, if there's any kids out there, doesn't mean it's over unless you're playing house league when you're 17. But you know, then it's probably over, but it's never, you know what I mean?
If you're on a trajectory towards professional hockey and you don't get drafted, it's not over. That is the correction to the statement.
It is correct. That is what I meant to say, but many words hard in brain. Okay, let's take a look at some of these questions, and then we'll let everyone else. We'll let you all go home afterwards. By the way, I did want to mention this before we do questions. Steven Ellis mentioned that LJ Mooney has a really cool cousin and did not say who it was.
Yeah.
The really cool cousin is Logan Cooley. So LJ Mooney is cousins with Logan Cooley, Little John Mooney, and from now on we are referring to him as Little John Mooney. So there's that. I've decided.
Turned down for what? Or is that the wrong person?
They may as well be the same. Okay, so first question of the day. How about Ryabkin to the USHL? I mean, that is becoming very quickly a pretty crazy story. So if you're not familiar, Ivan Ryabkin is probably the most hyped Russian player for this year's draft.
Mm-hmm.
And he has not had a good start to his season at all. The deeper metrics I have on him are bad. He's looked slower. He's got the skill level for sure, but Dylan Griffin, friend of the show, posted a tweet thread about what's going on there. His head coach with Moscow publicly kind of hung him out to dry a little bit, basically saying he showed up to camp out of shape and was struggling to keep up and didn't look great in the KHL and didn't handle the demotion very well and just seems to be floundering a little bit this season. And it was announced by the Muskegon Lumberjacks that he had signed a deal to go there, but his coach in Russia came out and said, well, no, because he's still with us. He's just in St. Petersburg, and he literally just got there to play games with our VHL team. the second division team. And they're like, well, we didn't know he had any intention of leaving. We thought he's here. He's at least going to play national team games. So we're not sure what's going on, but he's here. He's in Russia. He hasn't left. So I don't know what they're talking about. So, I mean, my logical brain, the only conclusion I can really draw is that the USHL, like the Muskegon Lumberjacks, maybe they had an agreement with him, but announced it too quickly. And he wasn't like they didn't really say, hey, I'm going to come this day, like not now, but in the future, and didn't tell his team in Russia that he was planning on leaving, or I don't know, maybe they were trying to sneak out. I don't know. I have no concrete information, but logically speaking, I don't really understand how this breaks down, especially if they're, think about it from his coach's perspective. Okay, we have a guy who's struggling, we need to challenge him a bit more, but he's not ready for the KHL. So let's send him to pro hockey in the second division. And that's a reasonable move. But then all of a sudden you see a news release where he's going to go play in America, and you're like, well, we just sent him to this other team and he's there. So why would he go to that team while also signing a deal to go to America? Like, when is he going to go, especially when he's committed to playing for the national team in the next little while? So I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So someone either did something too quickly, someone is lying, someone is not. It's just crazy. If he comes to the USHL, he'll be playing with Luka Radovojevic, I believe, with Muskegon. And that would be a fun pair of players to watch. I would have my bar set pretty high considering what I saw of Ryabkin last year, and what I've seen of him so far this year, but we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't know. That might be a little bit of a story to follow over the next little while. Which draft eligibles? Oh, yeah, what?
Oh, no, it's just an interesting situation. It's always hilarious that it's always Russian players that we find in these situations. When is it ever any other nation?
Right. I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of internal politics in Russia at play with this kind of thing, and it's still pretty testy, between Russians and the rest of the world. So I don't know. Russia is very concerned about public image generally. And so they go, well, I think it's why they have so many junior teams. It's like, they're like, oh, look how many we have. Canada has 60. We've got 48. And that's awesome. Do we send guys from Vladivostok to play in Moscow? Sure, sometimes, but that's the breaks.
Crazy.
Welcome to Russia. So I don't know. It's a strange place.
8,000 kilometers. Oh
yeah, a 9-hour flight for junior hockey. It's just insane. Okay, yeah. What draft eligibles already have a reputation for outstanding character, or who have concerns about their character popping up? So I'm not super comfortable talking about character concerns, especially because that is very much up to who you're speaking to and what they mean by that. And I also do not have any inside information that, even if I did, I wouldn't be super comfortable talking about it. And at least in detail. There are players out there, though, where it's generally safe to assume that if there are people who have them top 10 or whatever, and some other people have them 50th, but in the 50s range, they're talking about them as if they're a top player in the draft, you can pretty safely assume, and then they end up slipping in the draft quite a bit. You can pretty safely assume that NHL teams kind of went, I had someone tell me at one point about guys, especially smaller players in the draft, and this doesn't necessarily have something to do with character, but you have to think about the draft sometimes like you are an NHL scout trying to keep your job, right? And as unfair as it might sound, and as silly logically as it might sound, it can often be safer to go with a player is maybe not as talented or whatever, because their character is good, because they are bigger, because it plays into maybe some biases that might help you protect your job, right? Like I had, say, William Whitelaw or Luca Pinelli or Denver Barkey in my first round. And I want to reiterate, I don't have any knowledge that the character is an issue with any of those players to the point where I would be like, I don't want to touch them, because I had them ranked in the first round. But this person was telling me, like, you have William Whitelaw really high. Would you legitimately go on the podium and call his name 26th overall or whatever, because I don't think there's a single NHL team that would, because of the risks that they perceive that are there with a player like that. So it's like they on paper might be a first round talent, or at least as good a bet as anyone else at 26th overall. But at 26th or 27th overall, are you going to go with the player that, on paper is the riskier one, usually the smaller, more skilled guys that need to get quicker and more evasive and stronger? Or are you just going to go with the big guy who you may be able to throw on your bottom six, and then you look like a smart guy because you kept the guy, you drafted the player who has great character and all of these things, and they're just playing. It's a political thing almost, like the draft. And it's also part of the reason why I think the draft is silly in the first place and should be replaced. But the political angle is always something that's worthy of keeping in mind, and character concerns play into that in some way. If a person thinks that you have character concerns, you could line up 10 people and ask them about the same situation, and they all might disagree for varying reasons on how they perceive that situation. In terms of outstanding character, again, like I don't really have anything. I know I'm a big fan of Eric Nilsson, and a friend of the show, Mikael Holm, seems to think that the word is out there in Sweden that he is a very hardworking guy that has been training with the pro team, and the pro team really likes him. So there's that. But in terms of other things, like I haven't necessarily heard anything positive or negative about anyone. Well, I mean, that's not entirely true. Something I'm comfortable sharing and being definitive on, at least, and it's only October. LJ Mooney is the next Mark Arcobello. I mean, hey, Mark Arcobello had his day. I honestly am curious about him. How many games did Arcobello play? I feel like he played for the Oilers and the Leafs you would have been a teenager when he was in the NHL.
Yeah, I remember the name.
Yeah, he played for the Oilers from 2013 and ended his career in 2016, but undrafted, played games. And if LJ Mooney is the next Mark Arcobello, I mean, I'll draft that in the 7th round if he slips all the way there. Sure, a guy who plays NHL games and lit up the AHL like tremendously. And I thought he played pretty decently with the Leafs on the sort of 4th line. That team was fun. The 15-16 Leafs, they stunk, but they were fun. And the year after was actually really fun. I still argue that until now, I would say the most fun Toronto Maple Leafs team was that first year when they went to Washington.
Most fun, sure. Best, yeah. I would still say, is the 2021 team until this year, maybe.
Right, but I mean, like that playoff series, wire to wire, the vibes were good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Montreal, the team might have been better, but the vibes very quickly went into the dirt and stayed there.
Yeah, but that's on your. But that's based on vibes, not based on reality. They were a better team.
It's 2024. I said fun, and it's 2024. Reality doesn't matter.
Fun, yes. The 2021 team was not fun. It was good, but not fun.
Thoughts on Kurban Limatov? So I've got my second game of Limatov ready to go. He plays a ton of minutes, so that'll be fun. Limatov is a guy who is like, if you clip highlights of him, people are going to go, this guy's unbelievable. Like if you just look at him doing things that are fun and exciting and insane, it's there. You can find it. If you watch him play a full game, you go, okay, this guy probably has a long way to go, but if it works, it's going to be awesome. Like really good straight line skater. He's huge. He plays physical. He just loses every physical battle. He's a really interesting player with some really, really amazing high-end moments, but really rough around the edges. A player who, I mean, just by virtue of playing in Russia, might slip a little bit in the draft. But obviously it's still very early. He's been productive. But that makes sense considering how daring he is offensively. But rounding out the rest of his game is going to be something to keep track of for this season because I really like him. I'm optimistic, but I've also learned over the years that when you cross your fingers and hope to God pretty please that this player will become something that they are not,
God disappoints you.
it's way harder to do it. It's way harder. And so trying to get that out of your head is difficult, but man, with him, with his size and the skating ability, I still believe.
Also, going back to the LJ Mooney stuff, he's just got to be the small king, period. Now, I looked at his EP, like his lead prospects profile page. He's 5'6". That's what he's listed as.
And he plays like he's like out of his mind.
Yeah, like, and he is smaller than me. And that's yeah. Well, I'm 5'10", 150. He's 5'6", 146. That's nuts. Yeah. And his name literally contains little in it. So you have to dub him the small king.
Yes. And he I mean, I only tracked one game of him before he got injured, but he threw more hits in that game than a lot of people I've taken a look at. He is throwing himself around almost recklessly. Like, there's a bit of that Nick Robertson vibe to him, where it's like, yes, he's small already, but extremely dynamic, extremely skilled, extremely hardworking. Like, a guy who I think, regardless of where he goes in the draft, someday will grind his way into the NHL. Like, one way or the other, he'll figure it out, or he'll be the greatest hockey player that ever lived to play in Europe. Something like that. I don't know. But he's an interesting player who the odds are stacked against him, but personally, I'm a believer. We have not seen a true power forward stick at center in nearly 15 years now, outside of maybe Jeff Carter. Why is Roger McQueen projecting so high right now when his skating, passing, and skills are behind? I mean, I would put like a Ryan Getzlaf in that conversation.
Draisaitl. I know he's not like your typical power forward, but he's a very powerful dude.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what your definition of power forward is. Like, my understanding of that is like, I like the Draisaitl idea because, you know, he's not the most amazing skater, but he's not bad. But he's a guy who, if you have two guys trying to wrap him up and shut him down, he'll find a way to make a play. He'll find a way to get through it, and he'll find a way to do something productive. And to me, that's, you know, it's not necessarily that he throws his weight around and hits everyone. I don't know. You can disagree and put out your thoughts, but
yeah,
I don't know. I feel like there are some out there.
I think a lot of it is us expecting somebody to hit people as like a power forward center. Like, maybe that's the expectation, but like even Austin Matthews is kind of a power forward center. Like,
a little bit. Maybe. Yeah.
Well, he's big. Blocks a lot of shots, man.
He's big. But I mean, it is true there aren't a ton of them.
But the two we've just mentioned are two of maybe the top, like two of the top five. You could argue for Draisaitl. I would put him a little lower than that, but in that range. So
it all just depends, you know?
It does. And it is all dependent on your definition too, right? For me, it's big dudes who use their body to shield and protect the puck more so than skill. Like, I think Draisaitl, not that he doesn't have any skill, but I think he's just so massive and such a unicorn that way that he's able to just shield guys. So
yeah. I mean, it just comes down to semantics, right? Like, what do you mean? But I mean, your comparison of Jeff Carter, I mean, I think there are players like that in the NHL right now. I just don't think there's many. But anyway, the question isn't really regarding that. It's regarding Roger McQueen and why is he projecting so high when his skating, passing, and skills are behind? I've spoken to a lot of people about Roger McQueen because I've actually sent like a version of my list to people over the last week or two just to be like, hey, here's where I am. Like, what do you think? And obviously they can't tell me specifically because they are working for teams and stuff and they don't want to show their cards to me, which makes sense. But I mean, people, I got one person coming back and going, hey, Roger McQueen at 15 or whatever, 14, wherever I have him, is spicy, but I don't disagree. ... I don't disagree. And it's like, but the conversation, and I've said this before, like the conversation's always around what NHL teams think he could be. You know, it's not about what he is now, right? He's 6'5" and really lanky. So what happens when he's 6'6" and 220 pounds, right? Is he going to be that really skilled power forward that likely on Draisaitl? If you've got two guys covering him, will he find a way through that pressure to make a play? And I think there is an argument to that. But my issue with McQueen, and I'm sure there are people who will disagree with me, and that's totally cool. But my issue with McQueen is that he doesn't go out and like seize the game. I want my elite draft picks, like my super high draft picks, to be guys that when I put them over the boards, they go out and want the game to center around them, right? Like maybe they just pick their spots to get involved and do so really well. But with McQueen, I always feel like he's a step behind. He's sort of waiting for the puck to come to him. He's not just seizing the game in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But when the puck comes to him and he does have two guys that are covering him, or he tries to navigate through pressure, he's got the skill to do it. He's big and lanky and can make stuff happen. And I have to do another game of him in the next little while. But I've seen him a bunch, and I still feel the same way. And I know I'm not the only person, where it's like trying to get the killer instinct into a player when they're 17 or 18 as they get into the NHL as an elite level pick is pretty difficult. It's because their style of play has been that way and has worked for so many years that with McQueen, I just wonder if it's going to get there. The talent level is there for sure. And it's still very early in the season. So, and I can see why people might stick their neck out and put him in the top 5 or whatever. But to me, I just think that's very hasty and very risky at this point. But it is a safer bet in a way because he is very tall. He'll get every chance to succeed. He'll get every chance to be whatever it is someone wants him to be. So I agree with you. Like, traits in his game are behind others in the draft. But the idea is what he could be, right? Same thing with Radim Murka. There are things in his game that are a bit behind others, but in 5 years, what's he going to be? I think that whenever you're asking that question about a player, it kind of devalues them outside, like top 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th overall. I just think that's too risky. But if you disagree and you see the skill level and how he can work under pressure and the potential there, then sure, I guess I can't disagree with that. It's just a matter of what you value.
Yeah. Oh, also, totally
yes.
unbiased Steelhead fan mentions JT Miller, and that is, I think, the correct.
Yep, I would agree with that.
I think that is the perfect encapsulation. I forgot about JT Miller for a second, but yes, that one works perfectly.
Yep, agreed. Thoughts on Mikhail Katin? That's the big Omaha kid, right? 6 foot something, billion inches. I have not seen him, but he has 0 points this year, so he probably stinks. I'm just kidding. But David, you do this every week, and I always fall for it, but I'm going to go take a look.
David doesn't even expect you to look at them. That's what he said.
I know he doesn't, but I do, because I can't help myself. I can't do it. I have to, because I don't want to go, I'm going to ignore everything this person says, who constantly is watching hockey as well, and then be like, wow, I hand waved that one away and I really shouldn't have. But I'm usually not incorrect when that happens. So, but I'll check him out. 6'6" USHL defenseman with 0 points. And I think he had 5 in like 40 games last year. Maybe there's something there. He's also an 06, so who knows? Can you see Frondell slip in the draft due to injuries and turn into a wild card? So, injuries have been a bit of an issue for him over the last little while, but he is back. He is playing. I tracked Eric Nilsson today, who was playing on a line with Frondell, and I thought Frondell, I've spoken to Mikhail Holm, who is, again, our resident Swede in the show, but he and I pretty much very clearly agree that he's almost like the Swedish Shane Wright, where it's like he has this sort of sixth sense ability where if there's chaos, he finds a way to figure it out. Right? If there's a bobbling puck, his hand-eye coordination is excellent. He can knock it down, make a play, find something to do. He has just enough speed and just enough reaction time to get to loose pucks. He's not the flashiest guy in the world, but he makes a play, and he's just really good. Like, it's really weird to say, but when you watch him, you kind of finish a game and you go, well, it didn't blow me away, but he didn't do anything wrong, and it feels like no matter what, that's going to be the case. And I really like him. He is a little further down on my board than most people seem to have him. He's at 8. I believe his average right now is 5. And I could be seeing, I don't know if I would put him, like watching him with Eric Nilsson, I really like Eric Nilsson, but I'm not sure I would put Frundell behind him. But I think in terms of smarts and with other guys in this draft who are very, 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 very smart players and just get the job done, I feel like he deserves to be in that conversation. Where if he slips and he's a 15, 16, 17th overall pick, I mean, I would be more than happy to take a swing on him. And I mean, I look at Shane Wright's development. I know people are, slamming him for being a bust or whatever, but I think he's slowly just taken step after step after step. And he's a full-time NHLer now, playing with Eberle and Jared McCann, I believe.
That's like their top line then.
Yeah, and he has looked solid, like really solid. And I feel like over an 82-game sample, he'll get more and more comfortable because he's a guy who just seems to get it, and he's gotten a step quicker, and his speed is a little bit better to keep up with NHL speed and NHL physicality. So if Frundell can do that, then I could see something pretty darn good out of him if you give him time.
Yeah, he's listed as the 1C right now.
There you go. He's supplanted Matthew Beniers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which counts for something. As much as I love Matthew Beniers. Goalie projections are like reviewing Picasso paintings. I mean, that's true in a sense. Yeah, you could argue that. Someone compared Yaroslav Askarov to Jonas Gustafsson. I mean, I don't know, but Jonas Gustafsson was entertaining, I guess. I don't know if he was great.
The monster.
Yeah, God, the hype around him in Toronto was... I feel like that was more the problem rather than his talent. I think the hype around Toronto might have been a little bit too much.
We hadn't seen a good goaltender in years.
That's true as well, yeah.
And he was probably the best one throughout.
Right.
Like, he was probably the best one until Optimus Rhyme. And even then... Yeah, I had a cursed childhood with goaltenders.
Yeah, it was bad.
I grew up in the Andrew Raycroft Vesatoskala time. Like, that's when I was introduced to hockey.
Yeah, I grew up with Toronto. I mean, I'm surrounded by Toronto Maple Leaf stuff, but that's only because my neighbor was a Toronto guy who worked for MLSE and was getting rid of all this stuff. But I grew up, luckily, in the Curtis Joseph, Ed Belfour, Felix Potvin era. I had that. The team just also stunk, which, I mean, they were good, but then when Vesatoskala came to town, things kind of fell apart.
Yeah, I grew up with the second wind of Curtis Joseph. He came back and was bad.
I believe that the pick that Toronto gave up for Vesatoskala, amongst other things, I believe was Lars Eller. And Lars I think they traded that. I think whoever got that pick, San Jose, traded that pick to move up and take Logan Couture. So that's the type of class of player that Toronto said, let's trade that pick to get Vesatoskala. Anyway,
and Andrew Raycroft was Tuukka Rask.
Correct.
Oh man, I almost said something that might have gotten us demonetized.
We haven't had that yet.
No, only for the trade deadline special, because apparently me talking about Ilya Lyubushkin over Ilya Lyubushkin highlights isn't good enough.
Right. And on TikTok, we got nailed for election interference with our Russian guys. Talking about it, Nikita Artemonov apparently is election interference.
But they figured it out after a couple of days that it wasn't that.
Figured it out.
The only thing we actually got nailed for on TikTok was I put video of Caden Lindstrom like absolutely unloading on a player, like just fighting him, and we got
I remember that.
Yeah, you can't do that. So I've learned my lesson.
Correct.
I think the next one's about Timothy Liljegren.
Yeah, it is. Timothy Liljegren was decent, but not great. I mean, I agree. He was decent. I'll take decent.
As Craig Berube said, he was fine.
He was fine.
And you know who hasn't been fine when he's played there? Connor Timmins. So,
Yep.
And again, no hate on Connor Timmins. But
hey, we're fans.
But Timothy Liljegren will always take precedent for me.
Yeah, Timmins is depth on a contending team. He's depth on a contending team, I suppose.
Exactly.
Which Toronto should be. Yes, but have you considered that Pavel Mintyugorod has double Matthews' goal totals this year? Who's the best scoring 34 in the league? Not wrong.
Yeah,
I mean, the question has to be asked.
But this happened in 2022 as well. At the beginning of the year when Cole Sillinger was wearing 34 and was ahead of Matthews, and everybody made this comparison too. And then Matthews had a 60-goal season and won the Hart.
I think Pavel Mintyukov is going to score 65 goals, and I think Austin Matthews is going to score 60, and we're all going to have a laugh. That's my opinion.
Okay. Is that a career total for Pavel Mintyukov, or have you really gone off the deep end?
No comment. No comment. I didn't get enough sleep last night. I was up too late playing Fortnite.
Yes, I was there. Not playing, but observing.
No. Yep. Thoughts on Nathan Beam from Kamloops? So, no. He's on the list. I actually have a game of Tommy Lafreniere, which I probably will do before the end of the day today. So you can ask me that question Tuesday or Monday night, and I will have a better answer for you. But what I've seen of him is he's a pretty smart guy, but I'm not going to, I don't know. I don't want to go into too much detail, but he's playing a ton of minutes, and so we'll see.
Ask on Monday. See lots
more of him today. Yeah, Monday night. I'm hoping you cursed Rasmussen because I chose him for Tim's picks. I don't know what Tim's picks are. Is that Tim Hortons?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Sure. The Kings' only purpose is to give Edmonton a warm-up in the first round. I mean, they give Edmonton a hell of a warm-up, it seems, every year. I mean, last year maybe not, but
this year it'll be, yeah. And then the next time it was 4-2. The next time it was 4-1. So this year it'll be a sweep.
No, this year the Kings aren't making the playoffs.
That's possible, honestly.
The Wings, Isles, and Kings will be fighting for who's the most mediocre team in the league for a while. I think that's the Senators.
Yeah, I think the Senators are in there. I don't think the Islanders, I think the Islanders are just solid. They're just fine. Like, we always think, are they going to fall off? No.
Right.
No. They'll find ways to just be a first-round exit team.
Minnesota. I think Minnesota might be fighting for the... I mean, I like watching Minnesota.
I think
they're plucky and fun.
Minnesota's going to have a lot of money soon.
That's true.
Once these buyout penalties are done. Yeah. I think this I think this is the big year for the buyout penalties. I think this year they have $22 million in buyout penalties.
Yep.
So,
correct.
And I think it only lasts. Let me go check on this. But
I think this is the last year. I think
no,
this is it.
I don't think it's the last year. I think,
or at least it becomes extremely cheap.
Yeah, I think it becomes much cheaper as we go. So I'm just gonna quickly look that up on what is it, Puckpedia now?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, it's Puckpedia now.
Yeah. The weirdest UI for the.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it.
It's not. I'm getting used to it. It's a little more cluttered, I think. But
I kind of like it, honestly.
Yeah,
but that's just me. Maybe.
Yeah, I'm not complaining.
Brain is more.
The fact that someone or some group of people is building a site like that and running it is good enough for me. I will take it because it's a valuable resource.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. It is
no kidding.
It's important to have stuff like this for our line of work. It's just great.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Thoughts on Ivan Fomin? I mean, we've talked about him a few times. He's a guy who I would love to take a pick on in the 7th round. And he's very small. He's the Russian L.J. Mooney. Russian Little John Mooney. He is... he's everywhere all the time on a team that has nothing without him. He's little, but he's aggressive and rambunctious and very, very skilled and just confident as it gets. You just have to applaud the effort. He's just a lot of fun. And I think I would love to pick him and see where he's at in 7 years, if it's like a 7th round pick, because he's so much fun to watch. He's had a great start to his season, and he looks good against good Russian teams at junior levels. The rest of his team, I don't know if I can say as much, but like, for example, first game I tracked of him, again, I have a second one probably in the next couple of weeks to go through, but of his team's shot attempts, 77% of them either came off of his stick or came off of someone he passed it to immediately before. And I think 42% of his team's shots were coming off of his stick, and a large number of those were not from the perimeter.
Okay, so before you move on,
yes,
I'm just gonna correct what I said about their cap situation. Like Minnesota, it's about $14 million in cap space towards buyouts this year. Next year, it becomes only just under $2 million for 3 years for those contracts.
Much more manageable.
Yep, much more manageable. So like that's 2 top 6 forwards potentially, or a top 6 forward and a defenseman contract.
Yeah.
So Matt Boldy and Brock Faber.
Right.
I think Boldy's signed though.
Oh boy. The Red Wings won't be winning anytime soon with Yzerman at the helm with insanely stubborn approach and refusing to draft high upside forwards.
They will not. They will not.
Yes, and I think the bigger issue in Detroit is the signings they make and who they're spending money on.
Yes, that is the bigger issue.
I will also say, like, again, Red Wings fans yelled at me last season when I posted my pipeline rankings, and it wasn't like Detroit was bad. It's not like they had bad players in their system, right? Kasper, Edvinsson, blah, 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 all these guys. It's not like they were bad players, but the Red Wings went through a rebuild, and you could argue still are not out of it, but the Red Wings drafted so much, and so many of those guys just have not worked out. Like, let me just pull up the Red Wings as they are this season, right? I mean, I'm not going to include Max Planck because he's only played one game, but Axel Sandin-Pellikka having a great start to his season. Jesse Kiiskanen, who they just acquired in a trade, is actually having a really great season. But the Finnish Liga is a tough one to read. Dmitry Pechelnikov is having a great season so far in the KHL. Simon Edvinsson's in the NHL. Like, there are good pieces in Detroit. But on the other side of the coin, I mean, again, a lot of these players haven't played a ton of games, but Anton Johansson is scoreless in the SHL. Max Kilpinen, who I've kind of liked over the years, but never thought he was an NHL future player, has played 5 games and is pointless. Kiernan Draper, 4 games, pointless. Brady Cleveland. They have a bunch of guys in the AHL who have not scored. In terms of, again, this is just a model, but in these terms, there's a lot of players who are dragging things down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because of having a lot of draft picks and not utilizing them super well, right? I'm looking at Kevin Bicker, a guy who I think Sam Cosentino had in the first round for a really long time. He's playing in the Dell this year with 1 point in 8 games. Charlie Forsland, people were telling me he was going to be a steal in the offseason. I didn't see it because Hockey Etan is not super competitive. He's got 5 points in 13 under 20 level games this year in Sweden. You can just go down the list and it's not great. So that also doesn't help. And the signings don't help. And that's not to say that the Red Wings are a team where, all of a sudden this has happened. Like when these guys were drafted, I remember making all of my recaps going, they've drafted a lot, but I'm not totally sold that this is the best route that they took. It's just a bunch of solid, okay hockey players with little things here and there that they do really well. Anyway, it's neither here nor there. But yeah, the Red Wings are in a tough spot. I think
they're in rough,
tricky spot, and I don't know what the path forward is. Honestly.
And when you look at their roster, they're not that young. They're really not that young at all.
Yeah. Like, how old is Dylan Larkin? He's
28.
20. Okay, so he's still young, but yeah, I don't know, man. Okay. All right, I'll take a shout out to Marcus Kiersey in here. Cool. Yeah.
Your boy.
Yep. Thoughts on Louis-Francois Belanger? I don't even know who that is. He's an 07 for next year, so I have not seen him. I will say that someone asked about Xavier Villeneuve on the show Monday night, and he rocks. I've already gone to bat at Puck Preps that he should be way higher on the list. And honestly, if he were eligible for this year's draft, which I think he's 2 weeks away, he'd be in my first round for sure.
Damn.
Like, just unreal. Like, he was unreal when I watched him earlier this week. So whoever threw him around out there, kudos. Thoughts on the Grieva brothers? Someone asked me on Monday. I haven't seen them yet. Again, junior hockey in Germany is not competitive. So it's almost a throwaway. At the Holinka tournament, I thought they were fine. I thought Wilhoft was better, but they were fine. Until they play higher level hockey, I'm not super comfortable projecting them, but we'll see. Cutter Gauthier, Rutger McGroarty both had contract issues with NHL teams. I mean, yeah. I mean, look, I called it on Rutger McGroarty. Just going to say that. Called it. Cutter Gauthier, I mean, I don't know if that was so much a contract issue with Philadelphia so much as I don't want to be here anymore thing. I don't know what I can't remember exactly what happened. But
he's from Pittsburgh.
He's from Pittsburgh.
It can't work.
Yeah, it just can't.
I get that.
But yeah, I mean, McGroarty, we all know why he had contract issues. Like, he wanted to play in the NHL. The Winnipeg Jets weren't super comfortable and said he needed AHL time. And he said, trade me. And the Penguins went, we'll play you. And they played him. And it didn't go super great. And now he's in the AHL.
He got his ankles broken by Max Domi.
Right.
And now he's been sent down to Scranton.
Yep. My ankles are broken. There's an internet video that's one of my favorites. The my ankles are broken one with the skier. I don't know if anyone else has seen that one. It's a guy skiing and he lands, but he lands short of there's the jump and then there's the landing pad and he lands short of it and hits his feet on the ramp and then flips over and hits his feet again. And he's just sliding down the hill and you hear him go, my ankles are broken. My ankles are broken.
Oh God.
They are broken for sure, I think, as he slides down the hill. It's a classic.
That's
I feel terrible because breaking your ankles is awful.
While skiing, where you have to use them to
while
control.
Skiing. But in retrospect, I mean, I'm sure he's healed up, I hope. But, I mean, this was years ago.
Or not. He never recovered.
It's one of my favorites. I don't know. I feel bad laughing about it, but it's just such a great, thing. It's early, but do you have any concerns about Will Smith's play for the Sharks? Honestly, I've been saying this forever. People were asking me about Will Smith. And he always was a guy who is super, super, super skilled and super dynamic, and super talented, but the pace of his game wasn't super high. He was a guy who you need to get on the puck in the offensive zone to make things happen, or he needs to be a better give and go one-touch passer. I did not think he would be NHL ready after one season. I did not think that. And when I watched Boston College last year, I still did not think that. He was just part of an unbelievably talented line with Gabe Perreault and Ryan Leonard, and they all played their role. And for me, Will Smith was a guy that I didn't think was a guy that should just jump straight to the NHL. But if he did, I think I said that if he did, he would take time. He's a guy who's going to take time to hit his potential in the NHL. I did not think he would be a center in the NHL. I don't think he has the size, the physicality, the speed, especially to do that. And this is a big reason, why, and I might regret saying this in 5 years, but this is the concerns so far that people have been raising about him in the NHL so far is a big reason why I had him behind Oliver Moore. Like, I look at Oliver Moore as a guy who, you might not see the point production. He might not score 71 points in college this year, just like Will Smith did, but I don't care. Like, I feel like when you watch Oliver Moore and how he plays at both ends of the ice, the same concerns are not there. And the concerns that Will Smith has are concerns that could affect his total impact on an NHL game. I think he's going to be a good NHLer eventually. It's going to take time. Like, he's the type of player where it's going to take time. And I feel like San Jose must know that. And I mean, I hope that there's no discouragement there. And again, it's only been 3 games, but he's a guy who I think projects really well as a complementary offense skilled winger. Think like what Clayton Keller became. And even Clayton Keller, like, there's skill and there's speed in Keller's game. And I mean, you could argue he could play center in the NHL. I just feel like he's not given the opportunity. But Will Smith is up a similar angle, I would think. But these kind of concerns are why I had him a little bit lower and why I had a guy like Oliver Moore higher, even though Oliver Moore isn't or hasn't been as productive in college.
Love Oliver Moore. That's my boy.
Yep. Saw something from Twitter from Gabe Foley that he's expecting Ryabkin in the USHL in late December, January, but no, don't know the truth in that. Okay, like, I mean, that's the logical conclusion based on if you read what is already out there, because the Russian guys did say, we don't know what's happening after a national tournament coming up. So it's very obvious then to go, well, then he's going to go to the USHL afterwards because they said he was. So, yeah, I mean, that's an obvious logical conclusion from what people are saying. It's like, well, he's not going to go now, but he's going to go after whenever the Russian team plays their next international tournament. So I don't know. But it is very interesting that the team in Russia went, well, we didn't know he was going to leave. Like that. Now it's awkward.
Yeah.
You know,
looks like I'm getting flamed in the comments.
Really?
Yeah, Rand saying that I'm 5'9.5" and not 5'10". No, I am 5'9 3/4", so I rounded up. All right.
That's the NHL Central Scouting measurement.
All right.
7/8 of an inch.
All right. And also David Phillips telling me that Fabian Lysell only has no points in his first 2 games played in the NHL this season. Yeah, I know. You think I don't know that? Don't worry.
That's the point.
Don't worry.
He knows you know. How many goals has that team scored this season? That's always an interesting
thought.
I
have no clue about.
They have a guy named Jimmy Lambert on the team in Providence. Okay, they have 5 goals in 2 games. So, and he's -2, so he sucks. Yeah, it's official.
No. Fake news.
He's
fake
DOA.
News. Fake news. I'm ending the stream. Ending the stream. No, I'm kidding.
R.I.P. Good times.
Nah, but I still will go to bat for him. I still think he's going to be great. Yes, was I wrong about having him at 1? Yeah, but I still would take him very high in that draft. I would still stick my neck out for that guy. And that draft class kind of sucks when we look at it retrospectively. Like, it kind of sucks beyond some of the higher end guys and Logan Stankoven and Wyatt Johnson.
But it also is a draft where teams made some very, very big boo-boos.
Tyler Boucher?
Right? Well, yes, but also like letting Stankoven fall. I mean, again, like, I hate to be this person, but there's a lot of excuses for like, well, it was a weird draft. It was COVID. It was this. It was that. So it was weird. Whereas it's like, okay, but I don't know. I didn't think it was that weird. Like, I still had guys like Wallstead super high and guys like Lysell. I had Stankoven higher than I think everybody. I think.
Yeah.
Like I had him at 12 or something like that.
Yeah, I may have had him higher than you.
So exactly.
That's
like,
I'm like the only person, maybe. Maybe you know what? Like, I'll give credit to Rayan because Rayan was doing all these Instagram mock drafts with a bunch of people in the community, and he'd always take Logan Stankoven. He'd always take him in the top 10. So I'll give credit to Rayan, but it's like, I don't know. I look at
the Calder winner
because I do the same thing that Will has done, but I use the Seattle Kraken because I started in 2021 when they started existing, and I picked Fabian at 2. I did. Me equals idiot, but then I took Logan Stankoven with my next pick, so I don't feel so bad. I got 2 of my boys. Okay. Did I whiff a bit on the first pick? Sure, I should have taken Beniers, but I have Wright and Catton now, so I don't really care. And I got my baby, my boy, the guy I love.
A little baby.
So, sorry to go off on the tangent, but I just think it was funny.
Someone asked about what kind of character issues we're talking about. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, what do you mean? I mean, I remember the days when William Nylander was a draft eligible and people were talking about him being selfish because he always wanted the puck and that Toronto shouldn't pick him because he's not a team player. And in my head, I'm just like, well, if I played on a hockey team with William Nylander, I'd pass him the puck all the frickin' time.
Yes.
So if that's a character problem, then I'll have a team full of jerks then, sure. But for me, I mean, it depends on what your understanding of a character issue is. You could ask some people and they're like, well, I don't like people who are cocky. But
you'd hate me.
Which fair enough. But fair enough. But also it's like, I don't know, if a person has the right to be cocky, then they can be cocky. Cool. You know,
I think it's
why
fine.
not? It's just you have to be able to back it up.
Yes.
You're sticking your neck out, so back it up. But I mean, there are legitimate things that NHL teams are concerned about. Things like, well, they're not dedicated to training. They don't do the, it's funny. There's a player who I know for a fact a team sent a questionnaire to all of the prospects that they were interested in, all of the players. It was literally 1 page or something like that, maybe 2 pages. And this one player, everybody sent it in except one, because it was the easiest thing in the world to do. And so, everybody sent it back except one kid. And that kid slipped in the draft a lot and was a very, very talented player. But it was like, well, okay, I guess this kid doesn't want to play for us because we're not going to draft a guy who can't at least fill out 2 pages of paper. And this was years ago, by the way. So like, this is a long time ago, but it's like, we can't trust that then, right? We can't, like, clearly he doesn't care enough, right? It's a 2-way street. And eventually he got drafted and whatever, but you know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. So it depends on what you mean. Obviously there are other people like, say, Logan Mailloux, where there is very, very well documented things where you could very reasonably go, yeah, I don't want to hitch my wagon to that. I would rather not. And I mean, doesn't mean nobody does, but those kinds of things also factor, but it just depends on what you mean, really. But this year, I mean, personally, I've heard nothing super, super concerning about anybody, but there are players out there where people are talking and word gets out about commitment and personality and a big thing for people is how you treat your teammates. And if you don't treat your teammates very well, that's an easy thing that gets out amongst scouts. All you have to do is talk to a coach and the coach will be honest. Now, depends on what you mean by not nice to their teammates, but it does happen and it's out there.
Yeah.
It is out there.
I will just also clarify.
Yes.
When I said 2021 kind of sucks, I just meant that as a cope. Okay. It's pure cope. I think that class is pretty decent, but it's not the strongest. So
it drops off pretty quick.
Yeah, it does.
Guys went later than they should have, for sure.
So I apologize for my wording. That is me coping because I want to see my boy succeed, and I'm tired of having this stain on my record. I want him to get into the NHL and just show why I think he's very good. But my expectations have been lowered, all right? So I'll eat the Dookie sandwich. I was wrong. And we move on. It's okay.
Yeah, we can move on. What else is going on here? Let's see. Oh, yeah, someone compares to JT Miller. Oh, David Phillips says, I'm learning from Alexander Plasovsky to listen to him more. You mean the guy who has, 10 points in 13 games this year in the Russian Junior League? That guy? The one who is not putting up very good numbers, like, at all on a pretty good team? That guy? Okay, cool. I'll keep that in mind. I'm half kidding, but also not really. Roger McQueen gives me Mike Rasmussen vibes. No, I like him a lot more than I remember liking Michael Rasmussen. Michael Rasmussen was a I'm going to be a jerk in front of the net and slap at the puck vibes kind of guy. McQueen has more skill. I think McQueen sees the ice better. I think McQueen is more of a talented individual player with some physicality to his game. I mean, Rasmussen has that as well, but I think there's more to McQueen than what I remember of Rasmussen. And I did not like Rasmussen much. Thoughts on Mikkel Eriksson? He's a water bug on ice. I need to go back and watch more of him. I thought that he was a guy that was very skilled and very fun to watch, but very tough to project to the NHL. Think like Elias Stroma-Vatna last year was also very, very skilled and very fun to watch, but even more difficult to project to the NHL. I think Eriksson, it's just the physical play is where things kind of fall apart. And he doesn't have that elite speed. He moves his feet a lot. He's very skilled, but he doesn't get around super well. And I will check back in on him. I'm not done with him. He's very young for the draft class as well. But the bar for guys like him has to be really, really, really high. And as of right now, I don't think he's quite there, but that doesn't mean he won't be at the end of the season. Mm-hmm. Thoughts on Brady Waslin? He's solid. I've seen him a couple of times. I will be going to Niagara probably early November to go to a game, maybe with David Phillips if he's around.
Yeah, meet the guy who torments you with all these terrible players.
Exactly. All these awful hockey players. Yeah, but Brady Waslin, really, really great shooter, skilled guy. Every time I've seen Niagara this season, he's been a standout with Kevin He and all that stuff.
I think he's a big supportive reason why Niagara's taken a big step in the right direction. He's a good player so far, but I don't have details on him.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see Gabriel Daigle going in the draft? Is he still the top-ranked goalie? He is not the top-ranked goalie, period, this season. He's an 06 for starters. He's got an 873 save percentage this season, an 879 last year. Every international appearance for Canada that he's had has been bad. Like he is an 870 at the under 870 at the under 17s last year, 840 at the under 18s last year. He's just not, he's not it seems. I mean, again, going back to goaltending, like here's a good stat. The last time Gabriel Daigle had a save percentage above 900 was in AAA hockey, and it was a 919. So I don't see it. The track record's not there. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen goaltenders that are big and Canadian, and NHL teams draft them 36th overall, 38th overall, and go, yeah, they're not so good now, but we'll turn them into a good goaltender. Like Mason McDonald, Mark Vicentine. Who are the other ones? I can't even remember. Like they kind of fade into obscurity, but they're out there. And yeah, I mean, it's just, that's a tough hill to climb when you're a goaltender who at the junior level has trouble stopping pucks. And in the Quebec League, granted, Victoriaville's not great, but it looks like here there's been a game that they lost 9-1. He got pulled after 5 goals on 15 shots. He gave up 6 on 46 the night before. They won the game 7-6, but still, his best night actually was the last game he played. He saved 43 of 46, but that's literally the only game where he has 2 games this season so far where his save percentage was above 880 or 890, which does not bode well. So yeah, no, he's not the number 1 goalie this season, I don't think.
All right, so let's bang through these.
Yeah, we're gonna finish this up.
I gotta watch the Survivor episode because I haven't seen it yet, and apparently Rayanne loves it now. So
he does. Yeah, we gotta get on that. When's Caden Lindstrom playing? He hasn't played yet this season. I don't know. I'm not totally sure. I believe he was still injured, but I could be wrong. But I don't know. Might be a Google thing. I don't know for me though. Yeah, 2021 does not suck much. I mean, it wasn't amazing. Do you remember who you thought was better in 2013? McKinnon, Duran, or Jones? Because apparently Wah said the Avs selected McKinnon because of him or something similar. I mean, wait, because of who? Anyway, but McKinnon, to me, I remember at the time, this was very early, and I was kind of curious about prospect stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But watching McKinnon at the time a little bit here and there, I was like, this guy's unbelievable. And I remember thinking that McKinnon was the guy, just because of, how good he was, and he is.
Yeah,
and I feel like at the time it wasn't very controversial to go with McKinnon first.
No, I think it kind of was. I think it was Seth Jones that everybody looked at as the. I think it got closer towards the end of the year, but I think Seth Jones started off the year as like the.
He did. I remember he started the year as the guy,
and then he fell to 4. And I remember Nashville getting him and being like, "Well, this is the guy we wanted at 1 if we had a chance." Yep. And I mean, Nashville always drafts great defensemen, and yes, I flamed Seth Jones over the years, but he is much better than what his analytics say a lot of the time because he would just get played into the ground. But even I remember, like, because for whatever reason, I took a bit of an interest in that draft as a 12-year-old child.
Yeah.
And I started watching all these guys. And the Leafs didn't have a high pick that year because that was the year they made the playoffs. That stupid lockout year where they made the playoffs.
Yep. Who was their top pick that year?
Freddie Gauthier.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. Frederick Gauthier, man.
Oof.
But
fun times.
I remember watching McKinnon and going like, oh, my God, this guy's unreal. And he's arguably the second best player in the league. I'd put him at 3 or 4, but he's really great.
Yeah. In my opinion, this is a good one. In my opinion, 6'5" players have a high bar in junior because you're 6'5" playing against smaller players and you should dominate. That is true. The extremes are extremes. The extremes are there's a lot to go into it at both ends. And like being that tall, you should physically dominate. But just because you're big doesn't mean you'll be dominant against smaller players, but it does mean that you're looking for that guy to use their frame in a way that is productive and very, very productive. And that's a big reason why I'm a little bit cooler on McQueen right now. He's that sized player, but I want more out of him a lot more often, right? And that's, but we'll see.
I think we should look at size as a check mark. It's like, or a bonus rather than the end all be all. Oh, he's 6'5". Cool. What else does he do? Is he 6'5" and bad? No, thank you. Right. It's all about what you're able to put. It's the total package. Yes, this player can stand out because they literally stand taller than most people on the ice.
Yeah.
But what do you do? What do you do with that?
Yeah. How good is AAA Quebec hockey? Not great. I mean, I haven't seen a tremendous amount of it, but I don't know. I mean, look at the decline in Quebecois representation in the NHL. It's that comes from somewhere, and a lot of the time it's AAA. Remember to hydrate? Yeah, I got 2 glasses of water here. We're good. How stacked will Canada's World Junior team be this year? Quite stacked. They'll be a good team. I mean, they'll be very, very good.
They always are.
Berkeley Catton, number 1 ever, forever.
Love Berkeley.
Oh, okay. So the quote is from Patrick Waugh himself. We would not have drafted McKinnon if I wasn't there. I'm proud to see how he's been playing for them. I mean, that's a bold statement, but I mean, I'm sure Patrick Waugh, being Patrick Waugh, wouldn't say that unless it was serious.
Wasn't he the coach? Oh, no, he coached the Ramparts. Never mind.
He did coach the Avalanche, though.
No, he did coach. I was thinking about the Mooseheads, but then I realized, no, he was a Ramparts coach. So he wouldn't have coached McKinnon.
No. Yeah, he would have coached against him, though, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
I remember there being a story about Nathan McKinnon getting drafted in 2013 and him like having written on the back of a Patrick Waugh hockey card or something that he was going to be a Colorado Avalanche with Patrick Waugh. Like that was his favorite team growing up and he loved Patrick Waugh. So that was really cool because I remember that. I could be misremembering, but I think I remember this correctly, that like he had it on a back of some hockey card. Maybe it was his own like junior hockey card or like Timbit hockey card when he was a kid about wanting to play there.
Oh.
But there was something like that, and they turned it into a moment.
I didn't know this, but Patrick Waugh apparently owns a team in the French National League. He owns Bordeaux. So he sold the Quebec Remparts when he worked for the Colorado Avalanche, and now he owns a team in France.
Damn.
So there's that. So incoming NHL draft pick from Bordeaux for the Islanders this year, probably. Do they have anyone? No, nobody.
No.
Cool. Okay. Anyway. All right. Well, that's going to be it for today. Thanks for joining us. Again, thank you to Steven Ellis for joining us. You can check all the links in the description for all of our sponsors and everything.
Buy our merch.
Yeah, buy the merch. Again, link in the description. We'll be back Monday night, 8 p.m., regularly scheduled programming.
Yes.
And we'll see you then. So enjoy your weekend. I'm going to Toronto for a stage play and a concert on Sunday night.
Oh, you're coming to town?
So I'm coming to town twice. So it's going to be fun. I guess that'll be it, right?
No,
you got nothing else really going on?
No. There's something going on. There's something going on.
Really?
Yeah, there's a parade that's coming up.
8 months from now.
Yeah, 8 months from now. So you better come to town for that because start planning the parade.
Clear your calendars because if it doesn't happen for one reason or another, you'll be able to whitewater raft down Bay Street from AJ's tears.
Go Leafs, go, and love you all. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, please like, and please pray for the Leafs. Good night, everybody, and Godspeed.